Robert F. Lipinski.
Mr. Lipinski, can you please spell your name for us?
My last name is spelled Lipinski.
All right, before we get into our interview questions, I just have a few preliminary questions for you. Can you tell me what date you worked for RCA?
I started there April the 23rd, 1956, and I retired from there January 29th, 1993. So 36 years.
All right, and your job title was?
When I left,
Yeah.
Manager of Contract Cost Control. And if you'd like, I can give you one of my last business cards.
You said Manager of Contract Voice Control?
Cost Control.
Cost Control.
Cost, C-O-S-T,
Okay,
control.
cost control. So we're going to begin the interview now. How did you get your job at RCA? Thank you.
How did I get my job? I was working part-time at an accounting firm in Philadelphia. And when I got home that night, I'm not sure, either my mother or father told me that a Mrs. Moffett called, and she had set up interviews, or she was interested in people that lived in Camden. I lived in Camden at the time, that were interested in working for either Camel Soup or RCA. So I called her back the next morning and I told her I was interested. And she set up an interview with me with Camel Soup and RCA, and I went down there the following day instead of going to my part-time job, which I had, and had an interview with Camel Soup, and I had an interview with RCA. They were directly across the street from one another at the time. I don't think you guys remember that. You don't look like you're old enough. So anyway, make a long story short, I filled out the application form and I interviewed with the fellow at Campbell's, and they said they'd get back to me. And the asking salary at that time was $75 was what I was asking, because I was only making like about $55 a week at this accounting firm over there in Philly. So I went over there and it was getting close to closing time, and I interviewed with a man, and I put down I wanted $75, and I think he was interested in going home, so he really didn't talk to me that much. But the fellow from the, I guess you'd call it human resources now, in the old days it was called personnel, said that they couldn't pay me that much because the bottom was $77. So that's when I started for $77 a week. And I started, and I guess this was in March, and I started, like I said, April 23rd, 1956. And I had continuous service there, except for 2 years where I was drafted into the service. I left in December of 1959, and I returned in March of '62 after serving in the United States Army. Okay? Is that?
Yeah,
that's answer that question?
Yeah. Thank you. Can you describe what you did at RCA?
Well, first of all, I worked in the defense part of the business, which was government contracts, basically. And I guess in all those years, I could mention maybe about 4 large contracts that I worked on. I worked on the contract where we built the communications equipment for the Minuteman missile program, which was quite a few years. And then I also worked after that, basically on the Apollo program, and I guess you guys know what that is. That's where we shot the astronauts to the moon.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was very interesting. And in fact, the original, we had so many contracts that the government wanted a diversity of companies to be involved with that project, which Kennedy started back in, I guess, when he became president. And I don't know if you guys remember, but in Apollo 15 they had a rover. They built a lunar rover. Well, we provided the cameras where you saw the rover actually riding around the moon. And the two astronauts on the moon were there. And there were three, the rovers were actually built by the Boeing company in Seattle. The motors for the rover were built by General Motors, and we built all the communications gear. The color TV cameras, they had actual color TV cameras. And they built 3 rovers, so Apollo 15, 16, and 17 actually had our equipment on it. And one of the last things was, and this they were supposed to do if they ever went back to the moon, they actually had a dust cover. The theory was that they could, some 10 years, just take the batteries, land on the moon again, take the cover off the rover, put the new batteries in, and they could start these lunar rovers all over again. Well, never happened. But I worked on that program for quite a few years, and after that, I was involved with the radio room contract, which we had for the Trident submarines, which were ballistic missile submarines, which they built, I can't remember how many. I think they built 24 of these things. So we provided 24 radio rooms for these Trident submarines, which is the largest submarine that the United States has. And after that, while I was on that program, I was transferred to what they call a GWEN, G-W-E-N, Ground Wave Emergency Network. What that contract entailed was the fact that if ever there was a nuclear strike against the United States, we could strike back, even though they would knock out, because they have planes that fly 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, always in the air. So with this equipment that we built, we could provide a second strike. But I guess it was against the Russians in those days, but now things have cooled off considerably against Russia. So, and that's basically the 4 major contracts that I worked on all these years. Because some of those contracts lasted years and years, Yeah. So that was up until the GWEN contract was basically ending when I retired in '93. Okay?
Yeah.
Next question.
What kind of wages and benefits did you earn at RC?
Benefits. Well, of course, when I first started, health care was free.
Okay, that's good.
And now I receive a pension from, well, I guess you could call it RCA, but you got to remember, in 1998, RCA was sold to General Electric. So all my benefits come from General Electric. They don't. I get no benefits from RCA, but the benefits I do get from General Electric are I receive a monthly pension, and I receive health care benefits, which are second to Medicare. In other words, Medicare is your prime health care once you hit a certain age. Medicare is your prime health care benefit, and then the secondary comes from General Electric or RCA, if you will. In addition to that, I have a life insurance policy that somebody will get when I pass on.
Mhm.
And what other benefits would I get? I guess that's about all I get.
What were your relationships with your coworkers like?
Well, they used to have a magazine, it was called the RCA Family. And it was printed, I think, monthly. And it was like a family.
They were.
In fact, the boss that interviewed me back in '56, outside of the time I went into service, when I came back and I worked, he was my boss until he retired in 1983, so.
Okay. Were there a variety of ethnic groups when you worked at RCA?
Such as?
Like different cultures or, different races?
Oh, yeah, well. Don't forget, I worked in what was considered an engineering type environment.
Mm-hmm.
So most of, those were primarily college graduates.
Yeah.
Engineering, of finance, etc. There were very few African Americans that worked at RCA during those early days. Okay? I mean, they might have been working in the factory or something like that, but not in the environment where I was associated with, engineering type environment.